Okay. Hang on. Live. Yo, what up, Knicks Nation? Welcome back to another Game of the Week preview. Okay, we did one for the Los Angeles Lakers. We all know how that turned out. We don't need to go into that. Go catch also go catch the post game so you can see our live reactions to the breaking news of Luka being traded to the Lakers and AD going to the Mavs. But we're not going to talk about that. Go back and go tap in and go catch that replay if you want to see how that all works out. But we're going to preview the Knicks facing the Houston Rockets for the last matchup of the regular season. Who better to help preview this game is none other than my guy Jackson Gatlin. Okay, he covers the Rockets for Locked On Rockets, and you can go catch him on Locked On NBA podcast as well. All right, Locked On NBA in general. He covers the league at wide, so make sure to tap in, give him a follow. All right. Make sure to stay locked in for the show too. Hit that thumbs up button for your boy. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right. Jackson, my man. How you feeling today, man? How you doing?
I'll tell you what, Alex, I think the NBA world is still reeling from the aftermath of the Luka AD trade and trying to grasp with the idea of Luka rocking the purple and gold out in LA now. And on top of that, just no rest because Shams just keeps hitting us, right? They got the De'Aaron Fox trade on top of that now. Wemby's finally got his partner in crime down in San Antonio. Zach LaVine is a king. Like there's just, this is already shaping up. There could be no more moves this NBA trade deadline. And it's already one of the craziest trade deadlines, maybe already in NBA history. And I still think we got more stuff coming. Like that's the wild part is we still got so many more moves left to make. What happens with Jimmy Butler, all this stuff. But I'm excited to talk a little Knicks and Rockets basketball with you, man.
Yo, I'm looking forward to the conversation as well. And, it was once perceived that this would be like, a tame deadline. No such thing as tamed in the NBA, man, especially when you got the Lakers who are involved and just somehow you go from getting anybody that they want. I don't feel like going down the history. This isn't a Lakers show, man, but enough of just gifting these guys just generational talents, okay? And then on top of that, tell me, Nico Harrison has to be punching the air right now because how does De'Aaron Fox net more draft picks for him than Luka Doncic? But we're not going to discuss that, man. We're going to discuss this, Knicks Rockets game for tomorrow. And before we just get into me asking you about the Rockets, I got to ask from afar, what do you think about the Knicks this season?
I love this Knicks team. I love it when teams don't stand pat, right? Because there's a lot of teams that have experienced success over the years, right? They go on, a conference finals run or they make a trip to the finals and then everybody thinks, okay, cool. We run it back with the same squad. We'll be okay. Or worst case scenario, right? You make a trip to, conference finals, whatever. And then you actively regress, right? You see, management comes in and starts to tinker, or you think, oh, well, this guy's not super important. We can afford to let him walk in free agency, whatever. And then you realize, oh crap, this guy was actually really important to the success we had last season or for a couple of years ago. Like case in point, you look at the Denver Nuggets, right? They've slowly lost the important pieces that made them a legitimate title right. Team a couple years ago. Right now, they're a shell of their former selves. You look at a team like the Atlanta Hawks that went on that finals run a few years back with Trae Young in them, and then they felt like it was kind of maybe flash in the pan success, what have you, but clearly they regressed after that. Now they're kind of on the upswing again after retooling around Trae. So I love that the Knicks didn't look at it and they were like, you know what, we're cool with this team. We're if we just get healthy, we feel great about making it out of the East, that kind of thing. They said, no, we're going to bring Karl Anthony Towns, the big bodega to New York. And honestly, I love the setup that they have. I feel like they can go toe to toe with anybody in the NBA. My biggest reservation about them, this is like Tibbs is just going to Tibbs at this point, but I feel like he's just going to run these players into the ground, man. Like you look at it, dude, I mean, seriously, like that, is this not what just happened last season? Like, is it not what happened last year where the Knicks and their starters, right, their rotation, they play more minutes in the NBA than anybody. And then just over time, right, guys were broken down, injuries mounted and everything. And you had a roster that was fragmented in the postseason, right? Just out of gas. That was like a whole thing last year. So I don't know. I don't know if that's, am I overshooting here? Is that an overblown worry at this point?
To me, like, and this is just such a great segue. And shout out to our guy Ime Udoka, who's a friend of the program, has been on multiple times, covers the Knicks for SNY. You know, he just tweeted out that OG is questionable for tomorrow's game after what is a sprained foot, as we all saw last night's matchup between the Knicks and the Lakers, where catches the ball on the left wing, goes down. LeBron Cat go over to like just kind of like huddle him, see what's going on, and then OG on his own accord was able to walk off and just go get an X-ray and say there's nothing wrong. X-rays were clean. Not sure if they're going to do the MRI. I hope they do, just to make sure that he gets the full treatment and they know how to just make sure that he recovers properly, so that way we have him for the most important part, which is the postseason. But I think to a certain degree, it's kind of overblown to say that Tibbs runs these guys all the way into the ground. And shout out to number one troll for Knicks Twitter, Josh Hart. He just did have a post where it's like a baby just pointing at the bench. He's like, Dad? And it's like the mother says no, and he's like, Dad! And he's like, this is what the Minnesota police thinks what it's like playing for Tibbs. And look, I think, do we want our guys to be rested and refreshed? Yes. I don't necessarily want to see these guys just like playing like 40 plus minutes on a night to night basis. But I also don't think that Tibbs is the leading cause for like a lot of these injuries either. Like last year, Julius Randle, that's a freak injury. I blame, yo, Jaime Jaquez, where are you at, man? Because you tripped up my guy and caused that shoulder separation. So I'm looking at you because not too clean around these parts right now, all right? So Jaime Jaquez probably has an X on his back if he was ever to come through New York City. And then you look at last night, we're talking about a guy who's constantly injured every year in OG Anunoby. It's hard to say like, hey, is it what's the leading factor of this? I get it. We talked about guys being exhausted. It's easy to say, hey, if you're exhausted, if you overextend yourself, that's when you're most likely to get injured. I get that, but I think it's such a tricky area to go into that it's just so hard to just say, hey, Tibbs, reel it back a little bit. I also look at the bench as just kind of like a thing where it's like it's gotten better now, but it's not where it could be, where you can consistently give these guys the I guess certain amount of minutes that you want to see, like between 32 to like 35 minutes on a night to night basis, where it'd be comfortable. There's a lot of like lingering factors into that whole discussion, but it's just hard for me to get behind that Tibbs is that guy, just like running everything into the ground. I get it though. I get it.
That's just like the outsider perspective looking in, right? Because that's the beauty about, when you have a person like yourself, right, that you watch every Knicks game, you cover every game, right? I've watched, at least probably 8 to 10 Knicks games this season, right? Which is probably more than the average person who like only focuses on their team throughout the course of a year. But that's just my thing, is like every time I look at, a Knicks box score, I'm watching a game, I'm just thinking, man, like, all right, 38, 39, 40, 41 minutes a night. And it's hard not to imagine that even if it's not directly leading to like, injuries or whatever, that, the NBA, it's such a grueling 82 game slate, right? You have things like I feel like this day and age in the NBA, we see more of these like weird, like soft tissue, non-contact injuries, like those freak injuries sometimes that you point out. And I feel like there has to be a connection there between like, overworking a player, or if you're not able to really recover enough as a player, then you're more susceptible to those types of freak injuries than you would be if your minutes load was, in a little bit more of a manageable place. But to your point, right, it's not like the Knicks have a ton of depth that they can just go to on the bench. It's not like Tibbs has like a world-class bench that he's just like icing out of the game. He's like, no, you guys stay buried down there,
Literally
right?
dead last, my man. If you look at, we're not even at the key stats part yet of the matchup, but like if you look at just like advanced stats and you just go down like offensive rating, like the Knicks bench is dead last. So it's like you can't just leave them out there for too long. They're top in defense, no question about it. But like we played defense for so long without having to put shots up to keep the lead and just make it a fun game, or a competitive game at least, I should say. So it's a difficult position that he's in, but you're not alone in saying that stuff. Look, we have people, there's a faction of the Knicks fan base that doesn't like Tibbs, that would want him out of here, that says the same thing that you're saying. And you know what? And then people will say me, I'm a Tibbs protector, depending on who you talk to. They've dubbed this channel Tibbs Fan TV at times, because CP and I can just like protect, but just like advocate for him. I won't say protect. He can protect himself, right? He's a grown ass man. But like, just this is where it goes. Or CP, the nickname Coach Protector, is hilarious. Where we've gotten to at this point, where just trying to call it down the line, man. Just saying, hey, this is what it is. This is what we see. Yes, I would like for the players, like I said, to get fewer minutes, to be well rested. But I also look at the situation that everything's in. You had to trade up a lot in order to get Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges in house. So like the bench is, of course, going to take a little bit of a hit, man. So is what it is. But watching from afar, what's been your biggest takeaway from this Knicks team? Like, who's been the one that impresses you the most on this team?
You know, I think for me, it was looking at the trade, initially you thought, okay, well, great. Like the offense is going to be insane, right? Thinking about the 2-man game between Brunson and Cat, the 5-out spacing that's going to provide, how it's going to open things up for everybody else. They were already, there was already so much, I guess, speculation on how the addition of Mikal Bridges was going to look. And then you start the season and Mikhail's got like the regressed, funky looking jump shot, and that was like a whole storyline and whatever, but he's kind of rounded back into form. And the offense looked good, but it still looked like it was clunky at times, right? That they were feeling each other out. They were trying to figure out, anytime you're trying to incorporate a talent like a Karl-Anthony Towns alongside other established talent, right? Trying to figure out, okay, how can Brunson and Cat play off of each other? How can they be the best version of themselves with each other? It takes time for that to work. And there were some moments where it looked flawless, and there were other times where you're like, okay, this is a little clunky. Like they're still trying to, feel things out. The biggest question mark to me was going to be about the defense. Like how was this team going to look defensively, especially with Cat in the middle? Cat's not a known defender, right? Not to say he's bad on the defensive side. I think he's got like kind of a bum rap for like years of when like the T-Wolves were an irrelevant team, and that's kind of plagued him throughout his career. I think that Cat last year in the playoffs, when the Wolves faced the Nuggets, I thought Cat was like the individual best like one-on-one defender that we might have ever seen on Jokic. Like the way that he was guarding him in that playoff series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that him playing for Tibbs in New York, he's really embraced kind of that defensive minded culture, and he's really taken it to heart. He's rebounding at an insane rate this year. I mean, you look at Cat's numbers, it's not quite, is it the best rebounding he's done in his career? It is 13.6. I wanted to confirm that before just throwing it off. But I think for me, it was kind of, what's this team going to be defensively? How are they going to look on that side of the ball? And things were really rough early on defensively. And Cat had a lot of moments where it kind of looked like, okay, this trade is going to come back to bite him in the ass, because he's not going to be able to keep this motor up the way that Tibbs needs him to be the defensive anchor of this team. But it started to really round into form as of late. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. And especially over that 5-game winning streak that we were on, you got to see this defense take it up another notch. I mean, especially against the Hawks, the Kings. Who else did we play? The Nuggets. Like the defensive intensity did dial up. To me, it's still not there where it needs to be, like on a night-to-night basis. Like when you watch this team, especially like last night against the Los Angeles Lakers, we give up a lot of threes. We're dead last when it comes to percentage. If you go by Queen in the Glass to how teams just shoot against us from behind the arc, and that's an area where we struggle. It's too much of a gamble, I think, that Tibbs likes to practice when it comes to drop coverage, where it's like, we'll live with those shots. We'll see if they can actually hit them. And like the Lakers are a middle of the pack team when it comes to shooting threes, but last night they shot close to 60% from downtown. They hit 19 out of 40. You know what I mean? Or like, isn't that like, no, it was higher it was higher than that, actually. Higher than that because of the percentage wise. It was close. It was absurd numbers. It was absolutely absurd numbers. Or maybe it was 48%. Yeah, it was 48%. So yeah, 19 for 20. It's like, you're just looking at that. And you're like, what? Like, how can we keep giving up threes at this rate? It's just unsustainable, especially when you have teams in the postseason you're face like the Celtics who love to just chuck from behind the arc. And so for me, like the defense has gotten better when it comes to protecting the rim and just collapsing and just the rotation. Like they still need to improve their communication to be on a string. But I think a lot of that will be be fixed when you get Mitchell Robinson back. He's our best rim protector on this team. He's not going to just like magically take us to like this, next level, but I think he'll help clean up a lot of the defensive issues, especially when you have Cat at the 5. And then when you have Brunson at the point, having Mitch, that's what helped. Like he was a safety valve. So if you're going to have Cat behind Brunson, you're going to see a lot of those flaws, but definitely the 3-point defense, just staying on point. Is like
I will say I'm really excited to see, and I don't know if Tibbs would do this, but on paper at least, I would love to see some Cat Robinson like Twin Towers lineups like together.
That'd be cool.
Because that gives, so the one thing, right? You look around, and I think there's like that one tier of teams in the NBA that are kind of a cut above the rest. And I'm sorry, Knicks fans, I'm not trying to piss y'all off by saying this, but it's just facts right now. It's the Thunder, it's the Cavs, and it's the Celtics. Like that's the top 3 right now in how the NBA is shaping out so far this season. And all 3 of those teams have this unique ability to run either the double big lineup, And each team, you can look at it, right? So Cavs have Allen and Mobley, Celtics have Porzingis and Horford, and then OKC has Chet and Hartenstein. However, neither of those guys have been healthy at the same time yet this season, so we haven't seen it actually play together. We haven't seen how it actually looks. But I think on paper, the fit is there. So they can play with a single big and a bunch of guards and wings. They can play with the double big lineup and have a ton of size out there. And then the Knicks get that opportunity as well with a healthy Mitchell Robinson. So, like, that's what then I think elevates them, getting Robinson back, making sure he's healthy, and then hopefully getting some time with him to play alongside Cat so that those two can kind of establish like a big to big rhythm and figure out how it looks with Cat kind of spacing things out as the 4 on the floor as opposed to being the 5. That's a wrinkle that we have yet to see, and I think gives the Knicks kind of like another like switch up when it comes to facing some of these other teams.
For sure, and I'm hoping that we do go to that lineup, and especially when you think about, I mean, that's what worked if you look at Minnesota, right? I think you just said it, but it's like you have Gobert and you have Cat out there, and that's just kind of like we saw that was a recipe that they needed to get to the Western Conference Finals. So I'm looking forward to seeing Mitch get back on the court and seeing how that helps. So absolutely, but defense overall, like I said, needs to take a step up in the right direction, especially when it comes to guarding the 3. And we'll see that. Hopefully, when Mitch gets back there, you don't put that stress on Josh Hart, Bridges, and OG to just be those guys constantly defending everything. You get a guy who can be your safety valve, and then it'll start to take a step up. But salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another Game of the Week preview. With me on the other side is my guy, Jackson Gatlin. He covers the Rockets for Locked On Rockets, and you can also catch him over on Locked On NBA. So make sure to go check him out there. Make sure to give him a follow. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. All right. Now let's get into your team that you cover, the Houston Rockets. All right. What's the status? What's the heat check on the team so far this season?
They're good. Like, they're so much better than I thought they were going to be. They're so much better than the NBA world thought they were going to be. Look, man, the expectations coming into this season for the Rockets, I was expecting like kind of a very linear growth curve. Like, all right, cool. They were 41-41 last year. They played 500 basketball. They went from being like the laughing stock of the NBA to actually playing like respectable high level basketball. We're on a night to night basis. Nobody wanted to play the Rockets last season. Like, they were a gritty, tough it out team, and they were playing like real, like adult grown man basketball for the first time in a few years. It was awesome. And then they like somehow leveled up from that. And that's the thing is I kind of thought, okay, cool. They'll come in this year. If all the young guys take some steps forward, cool. They brought in Steven Adams at the trade deadline last season. And so he was, projected to be the backup big behind Alper and Şengün. And, just these little additions, getting Tari Eason back healthy was a really big one because he only played like one quarter of the season last year, and he's a really big part of the success that they're having this season. So you can look at it as kind of those are the two major additions, right? Adding Steven Adams, adding Tari Eason to last year's squad that won 41 games. Expected Reed Shepherd to be a little bit more NBA ready. The shot hasn't been there, so that's been a little disappointing, but kind of a smaller, more under the radar storyline. But man, they were the 10th best defense in the NBA last year. And they just, they like completely doubled down on it. They were like, no, we can be way better. And for a minute there, they were only trailing the Thunder, who have literally had a historically great defense so far this season. So, and the Rockets defense has slipped a little bit because they lost Jabari Smith Jr. due to like this weird freak hand injury that he suffered at shoot around. Which I'm still like my headcanon, like my conspiracy theory is that like the only way you break your hand at shoot around is if like Steven Adams somehow slapped your hand. Like, he's the strongest dude in the NBA. There must have been something like Jabari going for a rebound, or maybe he was messing with Steve-O and just Steve-O like whacked his hand and broke it by accident. Like we have no idea how it actually happened, but it happened. So they missed Jabari for a chunk of time. He's still out. They missed Tari Eason for 13 straight games under the guise of like injury management. And then they renamed it to like leg soreness from the same leg that he, missed pretty much all of last season with. So that was kind of a concerning trend, but he's healthy and back in the rotation. So when they lost those two guys, the defense took a little bit of a hit. So they regressed a little bit. They're still top 5. And that's what they've built their entire identity on, is being this defensive juggernaut. They are the most physical team in the entire NBA. Dyson Daniels, after the win in Atlanta last week, like after the game, he was like, yeah, they're probably the most physical team in the NBA. And they bring that mentality every single night. And that's what gives them a chance. Even though their offense has been trending up since the start of January. And Jalen Green is a really big part of that. I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit later on. But defensively, that's where they've hung their hat. And that's how they've been pretty much in every single game this year. even when the offense has been at times kind of a catastrophe, is when you play defense first, you always give yourself a chance to win games because you can drag the opponent down. You can make it like kind of one of those, mucky kind of, rock fight kind of games or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Rockets play those style of games, they like their chances. And it's really hard for, I guess, a high octane team to just overwhelm you with their offense than it is for, I guess, a defensive team to drag you down to their level and be like, no, we're gonna grind this thing out. And so that's what the Rockets have done this year. A big part of it has been Alperen Şengün's improvement on the defensive side of the court. He took a step up last year under Ime Udoka, his first year in Houston as a defender. His growth on that side of the basketball, his ability to navigate certain coverages. We saw Ime really trusting him to be aggressive, like playing at the level of the screen a little bit more often, blitzing sometimes, like way more trust than he ever saw in the previous coaching regime with Steven Silas, who exclusively played Şengün as a drop big, and that was literally just asking him to be barbecued every single play down the court because that's not his strength as a player. So, and he's gotten tremendously better on the defensive side of the court this season. The continued growth and improvement from Amin Thompson now in his second year, and then getting Tari Eason back. Those two have been dubbed. We coined their nickname over at Locked On Rockets, and then like fans started picking it up, and the broadcast started using it. And now it's everywhere. As we call them, the Terror Twins. And so those two guys coming off the Rockets bench, like they're legitimate, like they were difference makers for a chunk of the season. Like they would check in off the bench together and they would literally come into the game and you could feel their impact the moment they checked in. And it's a little bit of a different dynamic now that Amin Thompson's been inserted into the starting lineup, so they don't get to check in with each other and start kind of, wreaking terror or terrorizing the opposing bench units the way that they were earlier this season. But they've been a huge part of the Rockets' defensive success this year. The biggest issue has just been finding their level of offensive consistency. Some of that has to do with Jalen Green, who had a really hot start to the year, and then he slumped really hard in November. But basically, ever since like post-Thanksgiving, Jalen's numbers have actually been really strong. He started trending in the right direction through the month of December. And then in January, he just took off. He's been one of the best players in the entire NBA in the month of January. He had like 2 clunkers in there towards the end against I want to say it was the Pistons, and then that first of the 2 meetups against the Cavs where he kind of like really struggled. But outside of those 2 games, every other game he's scored like 25 plus. He's been impactful. He's been making great reads, making great decisions with the basketball. And when the Rockets have one of their guards, whether it's Jalen, kind of fulfilling his role as the top dog, or like Fred VanVleet when he kind of turns back the clock a little bit and he goes back to, all-star steady Freddie. When they have one of their guards play like an all-star caliber guard, and Alperen Şengün, who plays like a year, a night in, night out all-star, and he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink for the Rockets offensively because he's involved in so many different actions, whether it's screening, whether it's facilitating out of the middle of the floor, posting up, isolating in space, facing up opposing bigs from the three-point line, whatever. When he gets that complimentary player to play alongside him at an all-star level, and then you combine that with their elite defense, they're a really hard team to beat, man.
And you see that on a night-to-night basis. You see that the Houston Rockets are a tough team to beat. Honestly, when I watch this team, like in the handful of times that I do, I get like the reminiscence of like the Knicks teams the past 2 years, where it's a Tom Thibodeau. Like Ime is doing something like that's similar to Tibbs, where it's like defense heavy first, right? And like every time I watch this team, I'm like, yo, we had this saying for last year where it was the Knicks would come through with like, they come with like iron fists, they come with like metal bats, and like they'll knock you out. And that's how I'm watching this team, the Houston Rockets. That's how they play on a night-to-night basis. They are not fearful with getting physical and tussling whatsoever, and so they like to muddy things up. You definitely see that on a night-to-night basis. But before I follow up with my next question, gotta give a shout out to my guy, or our guy at this point, Jake Asman. Shout out to him for giving the $5 super chat. All right, he says, Jackson was my intern when I hosted afternoons at ESPN Houston. Love seeing this awesome collab. My worlds are colliding. Shout out to you, Jake Asman. Shout out to my guy, Jake, man. Jake is my guy, fellow Jets fan. I love the work that he does over on his channel. Does thorough, great work covering that team, man. Shout out to you, Jake, as always. He's doing even a phenomenal job every time he goes on ESPN New York, man. Keep up with the great work. That's great, man. I didn't know that you got to work with Jake when you were being down in Houston. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. I was still cutting my teeth. I was kind of a baby in the industry, and Jake had been around for a minute, and he got the I don't want to call it his big break because now he's back in New York doing, back in his home state. So I don't know if I can call it his big break, but he was working down in Houston, and honestly, it was a great kind of one of the first like serious like kind of media relationships that I was able to make, and he gave me a ton of advice and help like as I was kind of starting my journey because he was already kind of neck deep in it, doing radio here in Houston. So appreciate you, Jake. You're the best, man.
Shout out to Jake, man. Shout out to Jake, and shout out to all the phenomenal work that he's doing, man. Truly grinding and getting to the place that he wants to be. But let's get back to this, man. Let's get back to this. And so you talk about how the Rockets are playing this year. Talk about it's like a gritty mindset they got. I can't say like obviously you got guys who are the adults in the room was started with last year getting Fred VanVleet, just being that guy who can operate the offense, okay? And then you get Dylan Brooks, another guy who has been in the postseason, played with the Memphis Grizzlies, and just brings that edge on a night-to-night basis. But I feel like Ime Udoka is like that guy who's been the catalyst for like this big turnaround for this team. And how impactful has Ime been for this Rockets organization?
I've been on record saying this before, and I have no problem continuing to say it. Ime Udoka is the single most important acquisition of the Rockets rebuild. Period. Bar none. Like Amin Thompson's incredible. He may very well be on his path to future superstardom at some point in his career down the line. You see like the flashes of it already just in year two. He's already one of the probably 10 best defenders in the NBA. He's an absolute freak of nature. 6'7", can do it all on the floor. The only thing he can't do at this point is shoot from beyond the arc consistently. And he's already shown improvement in that regard. Doesn't matter. Ime, I can't say single-handedly turned this thing around, but the Rockets would not be sitting at number 2 in the Western Conference, and I don't know if they're still number 3 in the NBA after these back-to-back losses, but top 4 team in the NBA, right there with the Cavs, the Thunder, and the Celtics, if it weren't for Ime Udoka. This team desperately needed a culture. They needed an identity in the post-Steven Silas era. That's kind of the biggest issue that myself and a lot of other Rockets fans and media members had with the Silas era is they were literally just kind of rolling the ball out there doing whatever on a night-to-night basis. And it's fine. You can be a tanking team and still have a culture. You can be a tanking team and still have like a respect for the game and still be instilling good habits and tendencies in your players. San Antonio's done it. The Thunder did it when they were bottoming out for a couple years there. Like it's possible to do both. The old adage, I got to give a shout out to my guy, Frank over at the Rockets Chop Shop, does amazing content over there on YouTube. But he used to say all the time, you can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. And it felt like the Rockets were just like, nah, we'll just be bad and we don't care what happens. We'll figure out the rest later. And like, thank God Ime Udoka was the guy that they were able to pick up as their head coach, because like some of the other names that they were linked to, like Frank Vogel, like I don't think Frank Vogel's bringing you this kind of culture. Like not to slam Frank Vogel, but like, I don't know. It's just, they really, really lucked out with Udoka because he's a guy that players all around the association respect. He's a guy that absolutely commands a room. He's no nonsense. And by an extension, right, they got Udoka and then they went and got Fred and Dylan, which they were clowned for. Like the Rockets legitimately got clowned for signing Fred to like this, absurd deal, 40 mil plus, and signing Dylan Brooks, who was made out to be like what was wrong with the Memphis Grizzlies, which was never the issue. Like Dylan was a winning basketball player. Yes, he has his antics and he has his, the whole villain persona, whatever, but the dude is about his work and he takes things very seriously from like a culture perspective and from an accountability perspective. And bringing those two guys, plus got to give a shout out to Jeff Green, who they poached from the Denver Nuggets. But those three guys really, but mostly, Fred and Dylan, bringing those guys in really helped turn around the culture in Houston, right? It really taught the young guys on the roster, Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, it taught them all how to win and how to be legitimate professional NBA players and to have like a self-respect and an accountability for your actions on a night-to-night basis. And having Ime and then having kind of Fred and Dylan be that extension of him on the floor, you've seen the direct results of it. So I give a lot of credit to the Rockets brass, their front office, ownership from Tillman Fertitta on down for making the move to get Ime to make the sales pitch on why Houston should be the team that he signs with. Because there were a bunch of other teams signing up to try and get Ime that season. And the Rockets lucked out, and he's been an absolute difference maker for this organization, man.
Yeah, and you see it. And right now they're 4th in the NBA right now. They're tied with the Memphis Grizzlies for being 4th best in the entire league with based on their record. So look, it's been quite the turnaround, but even with the turnaround, you're always looking to see how can you just consistently tweak, as we talked about at the beginning of this show, right? Like you talked about how the Knicks constantly tweak. They said, "Hey, how do we tweak to get better?" You talked about how the Nuggets, like they've tweaked in the wrong way. How the Hawks, they ran it all back, right? But now they tweaked again, they retooled, and they're in a different position. You know, when we talk about the Rockets, especially with regards to one certain player out in Miami, they're always like, "Oh, well, why don't you bring that guy in because he could fit, you know, that defensive mindset, the being the guy that you need for this team." Jimmy Butler's been a guy that they've been saying, "Hey, what about Jimmy in Houston? What are your thoughts about that type those talks?"
I'll just say it's not happening, and also hell no. Like, just it's not. It makes no sense. Like, this team is already, again, this team has far exceeded expectations for what we thought they were going to be this year. They're kind of playing with house money at this point. So now they're just like, you know what? Let's ride it out. Like, every inclination, every conversation that I've had, the Rockets feel very comfortable just riding this thing out and just, you know, getting to the postseason, seeing this young core, seeing which of the young guys thrive or which of them falter in a postseason environment, because nobody on this roster outside of the vets, none of the young guys have any level of postseason experience. So getting to the postseason, getting that first taste of the playoffs, and then seeing who rises to the top and who struggles is going to be really important for making future decisions with this roster. And Jimmy's not the answer. First off, Jimmy's been the cancer everywhere he's gone. He's been the problem literally everywhere that he's gone. And what makes you think that that would be any different in Houston? So that's not the answer. The answer could potentially be, like, if we're looking at like the potential big moves that this Rockets team might make down the line, they've got the Phoenix Suns by the cojones, man. Like, it's brutal, because the same way that they moved on from James Harden and took all of the Nets draft capital, and then the Nets were stuck. Like, the Nets don't trade Mikal Bridges to you guys unless they get those draft picks back to be able to effectively bottom out and tank this season. That was an agreed upon. It wasn't a 3-team deal, but it was like a, hey, we'll make this trade with you guys, with the Knicks, and then they had to talk to Houston first and say, all right, can we make this deal? Can we swap these picks back? And so now the Rockets are in control of Phoenix's future draft capital. And I'll tell you what, that situation doesn't look great right now. Right? They had to mortgage their 2031 unprotected first, the last pick that they could trade, in order to get 3 really crappy firsts back from Utah and Danny Ainge. Who knows what they do? Maybe they're able to grease the wheels on a Jimmy Butler trade to make things try to work. I'll tell you what, I got a lot of respect for Phoenix for trying to go all in, because like once you've pushed like 90% of your chips to the middle of the table, just screw it. Just put the rest in. Just try and make it happen, right? Because trying to do what like the Warriors are doing right now is like the stupidest thing. Like trying to like straddle and be like, we think we can kind of like be competitive, but also we're worried about the future, so we're not gonna like make these. No, like if you're gonna try to win, Don't half-ass it. And so I respect what the Suns are trying to do, but I also think it's gonna blow up in their faces. And when it does, the Rockets own the future of the Suns draft capital. And so when it eventually crashes and burns, which I think it will, the Suns are going to have to come to Houston and play ball. Otherwise, they're going to be conveying a ton of top assets to the Rockets. So whether they're getting top draft picks from the Suns if they decide to be stubborn, or eventually they come to Houston and be like, all right, what do you want for those picks? They've got a very shiny Devin Booker who would look incredible.
I knew you were going with jersey. This. I was waiting for you to say Devin Booker being the guy. So you think Devin Booker will be the option in Houston, or be the guy, will be ending up in Houston some way or another because of the assets?
Only if the biggest question mark for the Rockets has consistently been, is Jalen Green going to be a legit number 1 option? Like that's been one of the biggest storylines for the last like 2 years, really, is what is Jalen Green? And then he had that insane month of March to close out the season last year. Rockets went on that incredible run, post Alperen Şengün injury. And again, he's been the Rockets' best player, period, through the Ime Udoka era. But Jalen Green's had some insane highs. He's also just had the inconsistency in his game, right? He's had crazy peaks, but also a lot of valleys. And for him, it's just, can you iron that out? Can you remove some of the lows? And even when you drop, right, just have an average game, not like a game where you're like actively hurting your team with turnovers and missed shots and that kind of thing. And this season, outside of that rough slump in November, we've kind of seen him do that, right? He's really kind of averaging out a little bit and having way more of those highs and fewer of the low games, to where my confidence level is at the highest that it's ever been in regards to Jalen Green. And so if Jalen Green is the truth, if he's like a legit, 1A, 1B kind of offensive option where he can give you 22 to 25 on solid efficiency every night out of that 2 guard spot, they probably don't need Devin Booker. Not to say that they wouldn't still try to go get him if he was like available depending on the cost, but then you could utilize those assets elsewhere, right? You could upgrade the Dylan Brooks position on the roster and go try and find like a star level wing to complement these other guys or what have you. But those Suns picks have more value to Phoenix than they do to any other team in the association. And that's exactly what we saw happen with the Nets, where those Nets picks had more intrinsic value to Brooklyn than they did any other team in the association. Because in today's NBA, when the clock strikes midnight, when it's time to move on, when you've lost your championship contention window, there's no better way to retool and to get back into that title window than to bottom out, tank for a couple years, get the top assets, get the top talent, and then try to work your way back up. And the Rockets did that, took them 3 seasons, and now they're the number 2 team in the Western Conference.
I'm so fascinated to see how everything goes for this team, because I feel like the Rockets are just so close to being like right there. So, because I look at them on a night-to-night basis, and yes, Sengun is awesome. As you mentioned, Jalen Green can be inconsistent. It's just like you need somebody to be that steady hand. And for the Knicks, it was like once you get Jalen Brunson, it just changes everything in the room, right? And so Knicks get Jalen Brunson, transcends to now at minimum we're second round exit in the playoffs. Now it's like, okay, we know what Jalen Brunson can give us. Let's give him some more help. You see it this year, all the offense on this team as much as possible. You have no idea who could put up 20 on any given night, even 30. We've had 4 guys this season put up 40. That's what happens when you get that guy, is that things start to go in the right direction. So I'm just wondering, it's just going to be interesting to see who Houston gets to be that person, whether it be a Devin Booker or maybe it goes another direction. Is there anybody else that you see that the Rockets would go after?
Well, I mean, one of the other names we were talking about before we went live was De'Aaron Fox was the other name that was heavily linked to Houston, because he's from Houston. He's from the Houston area. Just recently built a home here. And so there was a lot of speculation. Maybe Houston's that dark horse team that, that could have landed him, but they were content to kind of ride things out. And now he's moved to San Antonio. So it is what it is. But those were the 2 biggest names with the most links back to the Rockets. And again, as it currently stands, if Jalen Green pans out the way all Rockets fans hope that he pans out, then it's not an issue. You don't really need to worry about upgrading that spot. And they might, the closest thing the Rockets are probably going to have to an in-house homegrown superstar is probably going to be Amin Thompson. Now he's still a couple years away from probably that true like stardom level trajectory, but Alperen Sengun has held it down as the Rockets' best player for about a season and a half now. I don't know what Sengun's true ceiling is. I don't know if he's got like another gear that he can get to. I don't know if he can continue to level up his game. Based on everything we've seen so far, he has the chance to, and maybe the Rockets have a couple different homegrown superstars by the end of the day. But to me, what we've seen out of Sengun so far, I think that at his floor, at his absolute minimum, he's going to be an incredibly complimentary number 2. Kind of maybe like a guy in the similar vein of like, think like a Pau Gasol, or maybe some more recent examples in like a Kyrie Irving or an Anthony Davis, that they could have been, or they were at various points in their career, the top dog for a team, but it didn't quite work out when they were the number 1 option exclusively. And then you pair them with a real alpha and they get to kind of slot into that secondary role. And then that's where they're at their deadliest. That's kind of what I'm envisioning for Sengun at this point in his career. So if Amin Thompson can ascend to become the Rockets' true like number 1 guy down the line, or if Jalen Green can get there one day, and then Sengun is that elite number 2 rolling big man option, multifaceted, offensive piece, as well as the improved defender that he is. Man, they're cooking with oil at that point. Cooking with grease, sorry.
Cooking with grease. There you go. So now you got, last thing before we go on to this matchup. So now you got Luka out of the division, right? And on top of that, team is playing above their weight class, as you said earlier, like from what you expected. I won't say above their weight class, but they've been playing much better than you expected, and most Rockets fans have expected. What's the outlook for this team for this season? Like, what's the goal? What's the end point?
I think at this point, like the original goal coming in would have been just like make it to the playoffs, get through the play-in was probably the expectation, make it to a first round series, and like get playoff experience, right? And the expectation would have been if you just make it to the first round, you're good. I think the goalposts have legitimately shifted now
Mm.
based on just how good the team looks, to where if you did make it to the playoffs and you got upset in the first round, I don't think you could view the season as a disappointment. I think there's still like a ton of success and a lot of growth and improvement to be proud of. And it's kind of almost like a win-win situation, because if you make it to the first round and most of this roster hasn't ever played playoff basketball before, and you line up with, say, like, I don't know, the Phoenix Suns or this like weird new look Dallas Mavericks team with Anthony Davis, like, if you lose to a team that has legitimate playoff experience, that has a core of guys that have been together, that has guys that have, had tons of playoff experience, that's not exactly like a death knell. It's not a bad thing. It's just, okay, young team overperformed expectations and they lost to a team that had playoff experience. Like, that's not a bad thing. You can still learn a ton of, or gain a ton of insight and value from an experience like that. However, you look up and down the standings of the Western Conference, I think that whoever the Rockets get matched up with in that first round, I think it's almost to a point where it's like the expectation should now be a first round series win. Where whoever you line up with, whether it's the Kings, whether it's the Mavs, whether it's the Suns, whether it's the Wolves, like, the Rockets should probably be favored in any first round series, assuming they stay in that 2-3 range at the top of the West. And then the second round is where things will get a little bit more spicy. But up and down the West, man, like, outside of OKC, there isn't really a team that like scares me in the Western Conference. You can make arguments both for and against every single team up and down the West standings. You can make an argument at Houston. You can say, oh, well, they're young. They don't have playoff experience, right? That's kind of their biggest thing. And then obviously also kind of the question mark about who's their go-to guy, late in games, crunch time in the playoffs. What's that going to look like? They are also a very transition heavy offense, right? They love to get defensive stops and run out in transition. That immediately it doesn't fully disappear, but things slow down considerably in the playoffs, right? So there's a lot of arguments for the Rockets and against the Rockets. Grizzlies, kind of the same thing. They play a high octane level of offense. They get out and run a ton. They also turn the ball over a ton. They're literally starting 2 rookies, right? What are those guys going to look like in the postseason? Denver has regressed considerably, but they've got the 3-time MVP in Jokic. So, like, can you write them off? Not really, right? Jokic is still scary. The Clippers, I think, are the sneakiest team in the West, though. Like, the fact that they've been able to hold it together with no Kawhi for as long as they did. JVG came in and brought them like this new revamped defensive culture. Everybody, like 1 through like 15 on their roster, every guy defends at a very high level on that Clippers team. And getting Kawhi back and kind of reintegrating him, like, Clippers could be kind of like a really sneaky Western Conference team to be on the lookout for. But and then you get to that kind of the lower tier, the Wolves, the Suns, the Mavericks, the Kings. All these teams have some problems, but they've also got an insane amount of talent. Like, the West is an absolute bloodbath, Alex. So I think the Rockets' expectation should be to win a first round series, and then after that, you're playing with house money, right? But based on how things have looked, man, I kind of think we're headed for Thunder Rockets Western Conference Finals.
Ooh, Thunder Rockets Western Conference Finals. Big. That would be big. I mean, that to talk about setting expectations high after one season, going from, talk about just win a playoff game. Now the goalpost shifted. That is huge, going to the Western Conference Finals. It'll be interesting to see, especially with you got the new look Lakers and the new look Mavericks on the way, and we got to see how those two teams perform as well. But salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another Game of the Week preview. With me on the other side is my guy Jackson Gatlin. He covers the Rockets for Locked On Rockets, and he also covers the league at wide for Locked On NBA. So make sure to go check him out. And guys, make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. But this is the part of the show now. We got to get to the sponsors, all right? Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Everybody out there, let me tell you, I love playing Underdog. It's a lot of fun. When I'm watching any sport, NFL, NBA, you talk about it. I just want to put a little money down, see if I can win it back. That's just how I'm at. That's just where I'm at, man, okay? Goes a little too high, got to take my luck a little bit somewhere else, all right? So I'll go over to Underdog Fantasy, make a little sheet. And the cool thing about it is that you can choose players not just from the NBA or NFL when you're making a sheet. You can choose it from all different sports. So you can mix and match. And all you got to do is just choose higher and lower to believe if the player is going to meet their statistical goal. So say if, for tomorrow's game, let's say Brunson has like 25 and a half points. Choose higher or lower. If he gets over higher, there you go. You made the right selection. If you choose him to get lower, I don't know what's going on with you Knicks fans. I don't know why you do that, but hey, those are the options, okay? And then if you don't want to create a sheet, the other thing you can do is fantasy drafts. Underdog does offer fantasy drafts. So you and a couple friends, or you can just join a random lobby. put some money down. CPJD and myself, we like to put a little lunch money down, make a little wager, see who wins. And all you gotta do is just choose 6 players. They'll do their own fantasy category numbers breakdown to give you the point totals at the end. And that's another fun way that you can use Underdog Fantasy as well. So make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Once again, that promo code is KFTV. All right, Jackson, let's get back to it. Shout out to all the franchise channel members in here. I see Will Rose in here. Who else we got? We got Nostalgic Nick. Minutes Police, Nostalgic Nick. Shout out to you as well. We got John Talento in here as always. Shout out to you, my guy. We got Life of a Leo. Shout out to you. Respect Shaq. Shout out to all you guys for being here on a Sunday night, getting ready for tomorrow's game between the Knicks and the Rockets. Got my guy Jackson on the other side helping me break this thing down. KG74, I see you in here. Janelle Toure. Oh, hold on. Shout out to my guy Travie Trav asking a question about potential Cam Whitmore trade. This guy loves Cam Whitmore. Always comes into the chat every single night wondering if we should go after Cam Whitmore. Before we start breaking this game down, have you got anything about Cam Whitmore that we should know about?
Cam's awesome. And again, first off, there's nothing on the Knicks roster that the Rockets would want to trade Cam Whitmore for. Unfortunately, not that he's like untouchable or anything. Rafael Stone said this joke before, and he likes to joke. He's like, my job is to trade stuff for better stuff, and so he's like, I'll trade anything if it's the right trade. Look, Cam was out of the rotation to start the season, and then he got a few spot minutes here and there, and it kind of looked like he really hadn't taken the defensive side of the basketball seriously. So he got sitting out in the G League. They told him a lot of stuff that they wanted him to work on. When he came back up, got thrown into the rotation kind of by necessity, and he's been a completely different player since coming back to the team. He has really worked on his court vision, his passing ability. He's not the offensive black hole that he used to be previously. He's really worked on his defense. He's still susceptible to like some defensive lapses. He has some moments. God, he literally had like a moment against the Nets where he completely fell asleep on defense on a back cut, gave up an open layup, and then was trying to inbound the ball and like threw like the laziest inbounds pass ever and turned it over turned it over. It was just like a horrendous sequence from him. So he's still a really young guy. He still loses focus sometimes, but the offense is absolutely there. He's an elite play finisher already at just year 2 of his career. Insane high flyer, great shot maker, can get buckets in his sleep. But again, I don't really think he's going anywhere unless he needs to be like, trade sweetener for, again, like a guy like a Devin Booker somewhere down the line where they're upgrading and you want to send out like a blue chip prospect plus, a bunch of draft capital to get yourself like an established star. So, unless the Knicks are looking at like trying to trade Brunson, which, that seems like there would be a bunch of other bad stuff have to happen between that and, that outcome. I don't think we're going to see Cam in a Knicks jersey anytime soon. Sorry to break your bubble, man.
Man. So you're telling me, so Cam's a trade sweetener. Okay. I mean, I get it. Like the guy's young, talented. They drafted him. They're going to try to work it out and see what happens. Who knows? Maybe that's the guy that surprises and Ime gets to, make him just, I don't know, just fit in. Because it feels like when I watch him sometimes, like it just seems like there's a little like immaturity.
Hang on, I got to clarify here for Travi. I wasn't saying Cam for Brunson. Guys, I'm just saying there's not a realistic world in which the Knicks have something that the Rockets want and where the Knicks have something like it doesn't work. It's just like the trade's just not going to happen. It's not there. That was my hypothetical. It was like, oh my God, Jalen Brunson like demands a trade from New York and the Rockets are lining up their best trade offer. Like maybe Cam's a part of that. It's just not going to happen. Please don't run out of here saying that I suggested trading Cam Whitmore for Jalen Brunson, because that is the dumbest thing that I would have ever like. I just got to make sure just don't get it twisted. Okay, please.
Oh man, don't worry. I got what you're saying. I see people in the chat right now just like, whoa, what is going on here?
I know.
It's hilarious. But anyway, let's get back to it. Let's get into this game now, man. Let's actually break this game down and look at it. And so when I look at these matchups, I tend to like to look at the numbers and just see where the team's strengths are when it comes to like defensively, where they like to protect, where teams actually have an advantage at. And looking at, the Houston Rockets, they're similar to the Knicks where they do a good job at protecting the paint. Both teams protect the paint very well, so it's going to be a bloodbath. Whoever decides to go 15 feet and within and trying to get to the cup, it's going to be a little difficult. But here's where the issues do arise. It's coming for, it's coming towards the 3-point shot. And so Rockets, not necessarily the greatest, like the Knicks, when it comes to defending the three. The difference is, though, you guys don't allow a lot of threes, and neither do the Knicks. But conversely, the Knicks allow a higher percentage from downtown. And in the first matchup, we did see that it came down to like some crucial shot making, even though both teams weren't shooting the three ball well. It's my recollection of that game. I have to look back at it, but um, it came down to a lot of, you know, good shot making in the paint and who can hit some timely threes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, um, I mean, the thing that we've seen Ime Udoka do a lot this season, and we'll see it again. And I believe we saw it, if I'm not mistaken, we saw it for a chunk of the game in the first meetup between these two teams. Is he'll throw Alperen Şengün on whoever the starting teams or starting lineups worst shooter is. So like expect to see Şengün guarding Josh Hart in space and trying to see, can you dare Josh Hart to beat you from the 3-point line? And in the first meeting, he only took 2 threes, but he was 0 for 2. And it's just a tool that Ime has deployed this season where he picks on the weakest link shooting wise from the opposing team, and he makes that player either take shots or play make and attack in space. And so a lot of the outcome of this matchup is going to rest on how well Josh Hart operates out of those matchups and his decision making, whether he settles for the threes, whether he attacks, whether he makes good reads, setting up for his teammates. But the Rockets are going to park Alperen Şengün on him, and they're also going to have, and so that means if Josh Hart's not involved in the action, that allows Alp to sag off of him and be that extra rim deterrent, that extra body that's going to show on Cat when he's posting up, or Brunson when he gets downhill, or whoever's trying to attack the paint. That's what allows Alp to be in the paint more often and contest those shots, and also be in prime position for rebounding opportunities. So that's going to be a big angle defensively in this game. Now, the other element, unfortunately, to consider, I guess it's worth noting here, because I'm talking a lot about Alperen Şengün and how the Rockets are going to deploy him defensively. Alperen Şengün's questionable for this game, and Fred VanVleet is listed as out. So Alp's missed the last couple of games now for the Rockets with some left calf soreness, I believe it is. And if he doesn't play, this Rockets team looks like a very, very different basketball team, because there is not a singular player on the roster who can replicate what Alperen Şengün does. Steven Adams is a very serviceable backup and has given the Rockets some very quality minutes as of late, both as a starter and coming off the bench backing up Şengün. But he can't give you even a fragment of the offensive gravity that Şengün demands on a night-to-night basis, the double teams, the triple teams that he forces, which then opens up opportunities for his teammates. And we saw that on full display against the Nets in the Rockets' most recent loss. They really struggled to get any semblance of consistent offense going, because without Şengün in the middle to really kind of collapse the defense and create plays for other guys, it's just a lot of like, can Fred try and get downhill, which he really can't. He's not great at getting downhill. He's kind of a very limited as like a 2-level scorer from beyond the arc and then kind of that mid-range area if he's snaking a pick and roll. And then can Jalen Green put the team on his back and carry? And he racked up some points against the Nets, but he really couldn't. He wasn't commanding a double team. He wasn't generating many great opportunities for his teammates. And then they also just played like they were stuck in the mud in that game. It was just an ugly loss. So I don't know. This Rockets team is going to look a lot different definitely without Fred, who is their floor general, their the guy that sets the table, gets them in and out of their sets, offensively, all that stuff. He really is their like quarterback out there. So without him, that's going to be tough. And then if Şengün misses, then that's another kind of key piece of this game that would be out. Is OG playing this game? Is Josh Hart playing this game? What's their status?
Josh most likely will play. OG probably won't, even though OG is questionable for tomorrow. I would just be surprised if he's back out there. Like, OG is somebody that this team should just, when he gets injured, they should take that seriously and give him enough rest to recover. And like I said earlier in the show, just like be ready for the postseason. That's where he's going to make his money. That's what we're waiting for. He's making $212 million in total on his contract. So the regular seasons, as important as they are, and I know sometimes people like to diminish like how important regular season games are, he's going to be much more valuable when you need him in the postseason. We saw that when we didn't have him against the Indiana Pacers. So hopefully he rests. Josh Hart, typically when he's listed as questionable, he usually shows up the next game. He's a true gladiator. Will go out there, battle through injuries, and still go 120% and give you everything that he needs, that we need, rebounding, scoring, facilitating. He just does it all, being that free safety, strong safety. He's a jack of all trades when he's out there. So I expect him to play. Um, you talked about Sengun. That's going to be very different. I mean, Sengun was literally that guy in the first matchup where I think it was 3, 4 possessions in a row. He just called for the ball, back down cat, got those key points needed. And then, looking back at the numbers, Knicks did actually shoot the ball well from downtown. They, on 28 attempts, they shot close to 40%. Rockets, not so much. They shot 23%, but still, like, they still were able to win the game just because of their ability to cause havoc on defense, get out in transition and score, and then just be able to tack down the middle. And so, getting back, I think Josh Hart's going to play. He's going to be a big factor for tomorrow's game. I don't expect OG to play. Interesting to see if Sengun plays, though. But regardless, whether or not Sengun plays, I think another area for this team is, who gets out in transition and scores. Now, the Rockets are number 2 according to NBA stats as a team that likes to get out and run, and that doesn't surprise me. They're young, they're fast, like, you just see it. They just love to get up and down the court. Sorry, they're number 1. I misspoke. They're number 1. Stats just updated. So they're number 1 when it comes to. Sorry,
they've been going back and forth with Memphis all season. Yeah. Don't worry about it, man. Like it's like Rockets will hold the torch for like a few games, and then Memphis will take it back for a couple games. But they're like both right up there, so it's all good.
Yeah, it's number 2. It's number 2. I misspoke on that. Number 2 in fast break points, and then Knicks right now are 13th. But when it comes to defending fast break opportunities, Knicks are 7th. Rockets are number 3. So I'm wondering. This is where, to me, it's going to be where rubber meets the road. Who's going to get out there, get the easy points, make this game easier for themselves? Because when the Knicks win, they're able to go out and attack and transition. And this is a team that loves to play in the half court. They, for the most part, they love to work it. They like to work the ball around. We know that. But when they do get out in transition, they're very efficient and very effective as well. And on some nights where they're just rolling, it just makes it for an easier win for them. So I'm expecting this to be where, like I said, where rubber meets the road. Whoever wins this matchup, I feel like, will kind of dictate how the game goes.
Man, I think it was last week, right? They played Nuggets at MSG, and they just outworked the Nuggets. I think it was Brunson had 30 and 15 that game, and there were like multiple sequences where Knicks got like a huge stop. Like that was one of the games where I was like super impressed with Cat's defense, like down the stretch of that game, especially. But just getting like big time stops and then getting out and running in transition. And whether it was like I think Brunson had a pair of like back-to-back assists in the 4th, if I'm not mistaken, where like first it was Josh Hart like streaking down the middle, and like Brunson got the kick ahead pass to him, and he like goes up and in for one. And then Mikal Bridges had like a reverse on the other side of the rim, like on like the very next transition opportunity off a miss or off a defensive stop. And like Brunson, like when the Knicks can run, they feel lethal. And I don't think like the Rockets don't have an issue like they're pretty solid at getting back, defending in transition, staying principled. The biggest thing for them again is just going to be like, for them, they lose. They're currently without so much depth. Like you're literally down. You're going to be down 2 starters. No Jabari Smith Jr., no Fred VanVleet. And if you lose your 3rd starter in Alperen Sengun, and he's your best, most important player, like there's just only so much you can do. And I hate sitting here being like, they should still be competitive. And it's just, there's just certain levels. Like if Brunson sits out a game, right, the complexion of that game is going to be completely different. Like, that like, nobody on the Knicks roster can do what Brunson does on a night in, night out basis. And unfortunately for the Rockets, they don't have a guy that can replicate what Sengun does. And that's what's going to make this matchup. Like if he plays, then I feel pretty decent about the Rockets' chances of at least making it a competitive, high-level basketball game. But if he's out and they're missing Fred and they're already missing Jabari, like they just wind up losing so much depth across the board. And Jock Landale's been really rough in his minutes. Like the Rockets have this like 3-man deep center rotation, but Jock Landale has not been great this year in the minutes that he has gotten. And thank God Steven Adams looked really rough for like the first like month or so of the season, because he's just slowly been rehabilitating that leg injury that kept him out for like a year and a half. But he's looked basically like incredible since like early December and on. And so for him to be able to step into that starting lineup role, he's still only going to get like 20 to 25 a night if he is starting. And they will have to rely on Jock Landale to kind of eat up the rest of those minutes, or maybe like Uncle Jeff Green will come in and give him some spot minutes at the 5. But that's just a really big loss for them from a productivity standpoint if they don't have Alperen Sengun.
Hmm. It's all coming back down to Alper and Sangoon, man, and seeing that he's going to be there tomorrow. That's what I'm just getting from the whole vibe of like how this game will unfold. And without Sangoon, like I was looking forward to saying Cat Sangoon is my key matchup for tomorrow's game, but we're not going to get that. So my other key matchup is Mikal Bridges versus Jalen Green. That's going to be my key matchup for tomorrow's game, just because look. Bridges always going to take the best point of attack player. And as you mentioned, Jalen Green, he's a guy that can put up 20, 30. Like, that's just who he is. Even with his inconsistency, you just can't let him just get into a groove. So I'm expecting Bridges to get that assignment for tomorrow. No OG. It's not going to be Brunson. Josh is going to take another assignment as well, just because of his physicality, especially missing OG. I'd expect that. Maybe he gets like the Brooks assignment. I don't know, but we'll see. And then you're not going to put your center on Green. So I'm looking at Bridges to get that Green assignment, and it should be a good matchup, man. I'm looking forward to seeing who shows up for tomorrow's matchup with regards to like which Jalen Green are we going to get? Is it going to be a night where Bridges has to work, twice as hard and show off those defensive chops and showing what he did against Trey Young and guys of that nature, even De'Aaron Fox, like is he going to be up in their grill? You know what I mean? And just like causing havoc, making them feel uncomfortable because that's what you need to do to make sure Jalen Green doesn't start going nuclear from all over the place. And then conversely for Bridges, is he going to show that offensive repertoire that we've been seeing over this stretch of just since December, really? Like he's been looking good offensively. And so without OG, Cat dealing with a thumb injury. I'm looking for Bridges to get into that, scorer's bag, man. We're gonna need that scoring punch to help both Cat and Brunson for tomorrow. So that's why he's one part of that key matchup. And as you already mentioned, Jalen Green just being a lethal scorer. What do you think of that?
Yeah, look, Jalen this season, it feels like he's struggled the most against really physical defenders. Obviously, there's all kinds of different defenders, point of attack defenders that you can throw in the NBA, guys with a ton of length, guys with speed, guys with strength. And to me, Mikal is one of the best POA defenders in the entire association. Absolutely. But I wonder if we don't see potentially as the game wears on, right? If Jalen gets into his bag early and is able to kind of establish a rhythm, especially using his speed, like I don't know if I necessarily view Mikal as like one of those like hyper physical defenders, right? He's not like Lou Dort. He's not like Dylan Brooks, right? Where they're going to try to out physical you, where they're going to try to get under your skin, that kind of thing. He's more of like a technical defender. He's got great length, great quickness, speed, agility. He's going to beat you or he's going to like follow to your spots, right? Contest really well. I know he can be physical at times. I just don't know if that's like his like MO usually, like first and foremost as a defender. And so I can't help but wonder if like actually sticking Hart or Brunson on Jalen Green would actually be a better defensive option, just because Jalen's actually done kind of fine. Like he's done fine this season against like the lengthier defenders that I would have thought like, oh well, he's going up against this guy and this is going to cause him problems. Like he put like a forward on with a ton of length and it's going to cause issues. The most issues he'd had this season are when guys really challenge his handle. That's been the biggest issue. He's got like this loose handle still. We're in year 4. It's not as tight as it needs to be for like a true lead guard. He's a little loose with the basketball at times, and he can get really discouraged really easily if like you pick him up and you pressure him like right there at half court, like right as he crosses the half court line, and you start putting that pressure on him, he'll get out of his comfort zone really, really fast. So like to me, that screams like a job for Josh Hart, right? You put Josh Hart on Jalen Green, even though he doesn't quite have the length or the on paper defensive aptitude of a Mikal Bridges. I think that might be a better matchup, and it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Jalen start off, or sorry, Mikal start off on Jalen, and due to any combination of like these like monster like Steven Adams screens where you're like running into a brick wall kind of thing or whatever, or just him just getting downhill or him getting out and running in transition and getting going that way, it wouldn't shock me if we saw maybe like some switch ups as the game goes along to see like, okay, Mikal starts on him. All right, well, that's not going great. Let's throw Josh Hart on him or let's throw Brunson on him for a possession and see what happens. Because again, I think Brunson and Hart have more of that physical kind of the strength to really bump Jalen off his spots and make him uncomfortable. Just looking up and down the roster, I think Hart would probably be the best defensive answer for Jalen Green, honestly.
Hmm. I wouldn't be surprised at Hart, but Hart's also like good at just like kind of roaming. And
Mm-hmm.
I know Bridges is also really good at roaming too. I just for me it's like where do you want to like Bridges is essentially brought in here to be that number one point of attack defender. And so I could see him just starting out there. and so that's why I expect it, but I wouldn't be surprised if like
It's
they
kind of
both get
tough.
to share. They both get to share the work.
It's kind of tough because I feel like sometimes you get like that like stamp, right? Like your team stamps you as like, oh, you're the team's best defender. You're the team's like Dylan Brooks is still viewed largely like by the other 29 teams as like, oh, he's the Rockets' best defender. He's their like, what? And it's like Dylan Brooks hasn't been the Rockets' best defender since like midway of last year. Like Amin Thompson is the Rockets' best defender, and I'd wager to say that Tari Eason's also probably a more impactful defender than Dylan Brooks is on a night to night basis. DB is still great, and he's still very much the tone setter for this team, and he gives this team a little bit of FU, and every team needs a guy that has a little bit of that, right? A little bit of that crazy side to him, to give you some edge. And he likes to get under the skin of the opposing team and whatnot. But he's entering a little bit more of that, like kind of my co-host over at LOR the other day, Madison Moore, he said this, but he's kind of like entering that little bit of like Patrick Beverly kind of stage of his career where he's more of just like a nuisance on defense than he is actually like a defensive stopper.
Oof.
And he's much better. Like DB at this point is much better against bigger players than he is smaller, like quick twitch guards. Because you put him on a guard, he's getting cooked 9 out of 10 times. Like it's really depressing whenever he like tries to check a guard like on a switch or whatever. And I'm watching. I'm like, this is a bucket. So like get ready, Knicks fans. If you see DB checking Jalen Brunson at all in this game, that's an easy 2 for Brunson.
Hey, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I could see Josh going against Jalen Green. You put Bridges on Amen Thompson. We'll see. We'll see. It's going to be interesting tomorrow. See how they work. I don't even. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they both get a shot at Jalen Green. So it'll be fun to watch. But let's go over to our X factors, man, and wrap this thing up and get out of here. Since you're the guest, who's the X factor for the Rockets tomorrow?
It has to be Amin Thompson because
Mm,
ever since being inserted into the Rockets starting lineup, he's just changed the entire dynamic of the team. And that's not like a shot at Jabari Smith Jr. Jabari had a really rough start to his year where at one point, like near the end of November, I want to say it was, he was shooting literally a league worst 15% on catch and shoot threes. Like it was awful. He was 3-and-D without the 3 part of it. And then he started to trend upwards, and then he has the weird hand injury. And so Amin Thompson gets inserted into the starting lineup. And he's just provided so much more out of that second forward spot than Jabari Smith Jr. does, because Jabari is just your prototypical 3-and-D guy, right? He doesn't have much of an offensive bag. You're not gonna he's not gonna put it on the floor and create. He's not really gonna be super effective in transition. Like he can run and he can spot up, and he can fill a lane and maybe finish. He'll finish an open layup in transition, but he doesn't give you a ton of diversity on offense. And defensively, he's been great. Like he's really improved this year. As a rebounder, as a weak side shot blocking presence, there's a lot of growth in his game. But Amin Thompson does all of that and then a lot more on top of it. Amin Thompson gives the Rockets a tertiary ball handler in the starting lineup because you have Fred as the primary, Jalen as the secondary, and then you have Amin Thompson, who's been slowly upping his playmaking reps over the last few weeks since being inserted in the starting lineup, and even getting to the point where like 2 straight games, like he had the game winner against the Boston Celtics where Ime Udoka drew up the play for him to win that game. And then they tried to do the same thing the other night against the Memphis Grizzlies, and credit to Brandon Clark, who like D'd it up beautifully and kind of stopped Amin Thompson on the entry pass and the drive, and Amin had to flip it back to Fred for like a Hail Mary 3 at the end of the buzzer. But like the coaching staff has shown an increased level of trust in him and his ability to initiate and really run the offense, and not just okay, we're going to pitch you the rock in transition and use your speed and go run and attack. Like they're legit like giving him the rock and letting him walk it up and like initiate half court sets offensively. And he has these moments where like he gets downhill and has like this great vision and he'll kick it out for a wide open 3 or like collapse the defense on a drive. And I still don't know if he's ever going to be like a full-time lead guard, primary ball handler, but like you're seeing so many different ways in which he can be effective. And he continues to be really lethal when you play him out of the corners, and he can cut in on the baseline and crash the offensive glass, or kind of play him out of the dunker spot. And he'll be that kind of that release valve at the rim for, Alper and Şengün, for Jalen Green, when they either get downhill or playing out of the middle of the floor, out of the short roll, can lob it up over the top to him. And he just, you put it anywhere near the rim and he's going to go get it and throw it down. So he is kind of the X factor for this team. When he plays a strong game, which he's played a lot of strong games since becoming a starter. Like I think his starting numbers are ridiculous. He's averaging like Last I checked, it was something like 17 points and like 14 rebounds or something as a starter. It's
Wow.
kind of absurd. I'm sure those numbers have gone down a little bit with these last couple of games, the last couple of losses that the Rockets have had, especially last one, because everybody was awful in that last game against the Nets. But he's more or less their X factor, because when he has those big performances and when he shows up in a big way, it's really hard for them to be beaten.
Okay, so you're going with Amon Thompson as your X factor for tomorrow's game, which is a great choice. I'm gonna go with Josh Hart. And very similar to like what you're saying, Josh Hart does a lot of those things. You talk about being a tertiary ball handler, just initiating the offense, half court sets. He does the same thing. I'll say that the thing about Josh Hart that like really takes his team to another level is that he's willing to do all the dirty work that is needed to make this team go. So whether it's just diving for like a loose basketball on the floor, whether it's just flying out of bounds, whether it's just, like I said earlier, being that free safety, being a ball hawk and just causing that disruption that you need. I mean, that's what he can do. And then the thing is that he has such great awareness once he gets the rock to push the ball ahead out in transition. You just watch him just do all these things and he just takes, he is truly like that glue guy on the next level. And then when you add the rebounding, I mean, being top 10 with some of the bigs in the league, for the way that he's able to rebound at a 6'4" guard is just it's just it's just amazing, man. Puts Charles Barkley, he competes with Charles Barkley for like just height and just being able to grab boards. And then the thing is that when it's needed, he can score. And how he scores is a very gritty way, attacking out transition. He's a one-man band man when he does that. And then when it comes to being in the half court, he just knows how to cut and find those open slots. And then honestly, his three-point shooting has just improved so great this season. Shooting 37, close to 38% this year on low volume, 3 attempts per game, but still to not to he's at the point where you don't want to leave him open. Like he's respectable. Okay. He's not fearful to shoot the three. He's not doing like the pump fake all the time and then just wanting to drive. He's actually going to take those shots. And even sometimes the mid range, which just shocks me too. I'm going with Josh Hart as my X factor. I usually choose like Bridges or somebody else off the bench, but in these games, we're now going to miss OG most likely for tomorrow. Cat's dealing with an injury. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, and you need somebody to step up just so that you can continue to win and keep, your position in the standings while you're competing with the Boston Celtics trying to get second in the Eastern Conference. I'm going with Josh Hart for being my X factor for tomorrow against a tough Houston Rockets team, as we saw in the first matchup. And I these are the type of games where he loves to show out too. Tough matchup. The opposing team loves to be physical, loves to do this against the Orlando Magic, another team that plays gritty defense, and then goes out, gets a triple double. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a triple double tomorrow just because he thrives on these types of matchups. So Josh Hart's my X factor. You got Amon Thompson for your X factor. Great stuff as always, Jackson. I appreciate you for coming through. Please let the listeners know where they can find you. If you got any work up and coming, we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Alex. This has been a ton of fun. I love doing these previews and kind of getting to chat with other, representatives of other teams, other fan bases, because it also helps me kind of like get a better understanding of these teams. I try to catch as many games as I can and try to keep a pulse on other fan bases and other teams, but it's impossible, man. There's so much going on around the league, and that's why it's important to be able to rely on people who do follow these teams incredibly closely. The day in, the day out, the nitty gritty with the Knicks, and that helps. It shows in your knowledge of the team. So I appreciate you for having me, man. For everybody, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on X or Twitter, whatever, at JT Gatlin. It's also the same over on Blue Sky. You can check out my show, Locked on Rockets, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. Same thing for Locked on NBA. I host the Thursday edition of that show. So with that's where you can find all my work. I appreciate you for having me on, Alex.
No doubt, Jackson. Make sure to give Jackson a follow. Make sure to go support. Come on, guys. You know how it is. We as Knicks fans, we all love our team, but we also love the NBA at large. That's what makes us great, man. We just love it. We love catching and just learning about other teams. And so make sure to go give Jackson that follow. Make sure to go support. And make sure to support while you're here. And I'm sure we got some Rockets fans tuning in as well. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. On top of that, if you can't catch us live, you know what you got to do. You got to go to any of your audio listening platforms. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We're all over the place. Make sure to subscribe. You can download the shows over there so that way you never miss a beat if you can't catch us live on YouTube. Or if you do want to catch us live on YouTube, replay game, you can always catch it the next day. There's nothing wrong with that as well. Okay, and shout out to all the franchise channel members once again for coming through. Life of a Leo, Junior Caroma, John Talento. I see you guys in here as always. Trav, thank you for just lighting up the chat tonight. Appreciate you, my guy. We got Kid Lamar in here. Who else we got? KG74. I know you're always in here as well. Respect Shaq. Once again, shout out to you. Shout out to everybody, man. Shout out to everybody for coming through as always. I really appreciate you guys for tuning for another Game of the Week preview. And you already know what to do for tomorrow. Jam session, shout out to you as well. You already know what to do for tomorrow, right? After the Rockets game, and even during the Rockets game, you know we're going to have play-by-play. So make sure to tap in for that. And then, obviously, after the game's over, make sure to come to KFTV Post Game Live. We'll be breaking it down there for you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you all for tapping in once again. We out, everybody.